Hey, it's Guy Raz here, host of The Great Creators, a podcast where I talk about creativity with some of the greatest performers, musicians, and actors of our time. And this week, my conversation with Macklemore, how he built a massive following, one fan at a time. Now, as you might remember, Macklemore and his collaborator, Ryan Lewis, seemed to come out of nowhere about 10 years ago. Suddenly, their music was everywhere, and their record, The Heist, went quintuple platinum. They had 2 number 1 hits off that record. They had 4 Grammys. All of this without ever signing to a major record label. So how did Macklemore do it? Well, today on the show, you're going to hear us talk about his early days as a small-town rapper in Seattle, his struggle with addiction and how he manages it, and why he won't stop talking about social issues, from gay rights to what it means to be white in America, even when those topics might alienate some of his fans. One more thing, Macklemore's real name is Ben Haggerty, so you'll hear me call him Ben throughout the interview. We start at the beginning, back when he was a kid in Seattle, and he discovered the music of NWA. And he loved that angry, raw sound so much that he started writing his own rap lyrics.
I was 14. I was in 8th grade, and that was the very beginning of it. I had started writing graffiti in 5th grade. I was skateboarding, and those were kind of foundational elements, I think, that led me into participating in hip-hop culture. Not that skateboarding is hip-hop culture. Graffiti, of course, is, but I couldn't break dance. I started beatboxing, and then eventually writing down lyrics. I remember being in social studies in 8th grade. I was 14 years old, and that was the beginning of me writing down my thoughts and working on rhyming. And then by the time that summer hit, going into 9th grade, it was like full on, like, okay, this is what I want to do.
I read somewhere in an interview you gave where you talked about freestyling, right? Like ciphers. Basically, it's like improv. It's like improv. It's like groups of probably boys at that time, just like beatboxing and rapping and one-upping each other, and you had to just be fast.
Yeah.
Were there kids in your neighborhood that you, like, would you literally stand around in a circle with like 3 or 4 other kids and just like do that?
Every day. That was such a massive part of my upbringing and where hip hop was at the time. Because you have to think, like, we didn't have access to studios. We didn't have money to go pay for a recording studio.
Yeah.
So, eventually one of my friends got enough money, a couple $100 to buy a 4-track and, a $100 microphone. I eventually got to carry my first purchase in terms of recording equipment was from a thrift shop, actually, was a karaoke tape deck. And I got a microphone from Radio Shack. And that was the first time that I ever heard my voice on tape. But still, we were going to school, we were skipping school. Yeah. We, of course, were, a massive part of my upbringing was skipping school. We, smoked weed and we would rap. And, the beatbox was the foundation. That was the instrument that we would spit over. And it's interesting because that's kind of been lost in culture a bit. Mm-hmm. And without that, because what that gives you the ability to practice on top of what you said, which is extremely true, which is coming off the top of your head, being quick in the moment, rhyming words. It's also a performance, because it wasn't just, me with a couple other people. It was like, oh, they're freestyling over there, like across the street. Let's go over there. Yeah. And that particularly is like a 15-year-old in, at Garfield High School. That was very nerve-wracking to do, to step into that environment and be like, yo, I might come out a hero or I might come out extremely embarrassed, and I'm going to go in there and I'm going to roll the dice. Yeah. And I think that not only does it toughen up your skin, but it just makes you better as a performer in knowing how to be in the moment, which is really what we're striving for, what I'm still striving for. How can I be in the moment in whatever creative environment that I'm in? And those were the building blocks, were those years.
So some kid or like somebody would play beat, and then some kid would start and they would just say whatever, like, I'm the baddest mother, blah, 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 blah. And then they'd go to you and you would just feed off that.
Yeah. You kind of hop in, usually cut somebody off at a certain point when they're starting to fall off.
Yeah.
And yeah, that was it. And it's, some of my best, I was just at my daughter's soccer practice the other day, and it was at a park where we used to kick it at, on Friday nights or Saturday nights. And, I brought my 4-year-old daughter over to the water, and I still remember my best friend, who's also my manager now. The beatbox, he did a Jay-Z melody and beatbox, and it was like seven of us, and I still remember that moment where everything was it was magical. It's like when you're learning how to when you're working on your craft for the first time, and when it's just starting to click, and you see like the incremental moments where you're like, wow, I feel comfortable now. Wow, I didn't mess up. Wow, now now I could go, that cipher that I passed on last week, I would feel comfortable now hopping in that. And those moments were extremely important in my overall evolution as a person and as an artist.
I mean, now of course it's clear, right? But in the context of being 15 and smoking pot and getting wasted and being sort of a goof off, I have to imagine your parents were worried about you at the very least, and maybe not happy with you as well.
No, I think that's very fair to say. No, those years were very challenging for my parents, and it wasn't just like, it was. I think more than anything, it was the drugs, it was the weed, it was the alcohol, and that was something. They had a son that was a solid B+ student from depending on the class, and going into Garfield high school, I almost got kicked out of the school for my grades. So that happened very quickly, and it's still a point of like, a place that my mom doesn't really like to go. She doesn't really like to talk about it. She can well up. Yeah. And it's painful for her. And as being a parent now, I completely understand how
totally
traumatic that would be for a parent to have this like sweet, sweet son or sweet daughter, and like you're close and your family's close, and they're good enough at school and everything's okay and they respect you, and all of a sudden it's like, fuck you, I'm gonna do what I want to do. And I was running away and coming home smelling like Old English, and fighting and getting arrested and all those things that in a lot of ways I believe are rites of passage, is like a kid coming up in the 90s and in the early thousands, but still incredibly painful for a parent. And there was a big disconnect. And I think that by the time I became, a junior, senior, I had toned it back enough that that trust was built back up, and that they liked who I was again. But there was a couple years where it was definitely rocky.
It's interesting just hearing you talk about being a parent. You don't often see and understand the decisions your parents made until you are in the same exact spot as a parent. And I see it with my kids, where I'll say something or I'll do something or I'll respond, but it's based on like something else that's happening or some stress or something. And then I have a flashback to like my mom or dad getting mad at me, and me just seeing that moment without having the ability to see the entire spectrum of everything that happened. It's actually amazing when you think about it.
Yeah, I think that there was something, my parents moved, they switched schools. They took me out of Garfield, and in Garfield, for some background story to Garfield. Garfield is a historic high school that is where Jimi Hendrix went. Ishmael Butler, Quincy Jones, a ton of other legends from Seattle, and Bruce Lee.
Like the Diggable Planet, some of the
Diggable Planets.
Went there,
Ish went there. So yeah, there was this rich history at Garfield, and I had so much pride going to Garfield. I always knew that I wanted to go to Garfield, and when they took me out of Garfield, it was very tough. But I went to a slightly smaller public school that was up north where I wasn't from, and I remember I met a drug and alcohol counselor. Like, I couldn't just slip through the cracks like I did at Garfield, and I met a drug and alcohol counselor at Nathan Hale, where I went, that changed my entire trajectory. And it wasn't that I completely stopped doing drugs. I found mushrooms, which opened up a whole nother side of my personality and my brain. But I felt like I had support from an adult, and we were able to form small groups and have a sense of community. And that was something that I lacked at Garfield in terms of a healthy relationship. So the fact that they switched schools for me changed my entire path. I focused on graphic arts, I focused on music, and I was able to really hone in on that versus getting lost at Garfield.
I mean, you were so focused on, this was like the primary focus of your life from everything I've read, like hip hop music, writing lyrics, freestyling. By the way, did you ever want to take up an instrument, or did you?
Yeah, I played piano as a kid. I love piano. I wish that I took it more seriously, but I never turned into a great piano player by any means. I know, I got my go-tos when I sit down at the piano now, but I never turned into a great piano player. The thing is, Guy, I always wanted to be on stage. From the very, very beginning of my first memory of what do you want to do? It was like, I want to be on stage. I turned my living room and the kitchen counter into an arena in my head. I called in my grandparents and my auntie and my uncles and my parents and my brother, and I was like, come watch the show. Like, I wanted to have that attention. I was just that kid that was like, yo, look at what I've been working on. Look at what I've been working on in my room.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that never left. And when I found writing, when I found recording at the age of 14, 15, I don't think that there was never a part of me that was like, I want to do something else. It was like, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And there was this false sense of confidence because what I was doing at the time was embarrassing. It was this like prepubescent boy in this voice that hadn't changed yet, and in a skill set that hadn't been honed. But that was the one and only thing that I wanted to do.
By the time you were in high school, because I know you started a band or like a group.
Yep.
Elevated Elements was the name. No shame there. No shame there. No, it's and what were you writing? I mean, were you sort of putting your innermost thoughts that you might have put into a diary in your words, or what do you remember about the kinds of things you were writing about?
I was writing a bunch of bullshit. It was bullshit. It was we call it spiritual lyrical raps. And, and if you just rhyme enough big words together and enough big syllables together, and you rap fast enough that no one's going to know that what you're saying has no meaning, actually. That was the very beginning.
It works.
And then, by the time I was like a junior or senior in high school and had some psilocybin experiences that opened up my mind to a new way of thinking, that was a point where I started to use music as medicine, where I started to use the page as a mirror, where I was able to go deeper into who I was, what was my purpose, why was I here, and really be able to reflect. And I think that was a turning point for me as an artist, and more so as a human. Being on this earth, having a spiritual experience, and having music be the thing that I use to document it.
So would it be fair to say that there was, when you sort of, in your early teen years, you were kind of trying to emulate some of the music that maybe you listened to, or maybe it was like a pastiche or even a parody of it, maybe maybe some of it was sexist or stupid, or I don't know. I don't know the lyrics, but after you started to use psychedelics,
Yeah.
Am I right about that?
Yeah, I don't know how sexist it was, but it definitely didn't make any sense. It was senseless. Yeah, there was something about the psychedelics that I think
just opened your mind.
Opened my mind, and I think, for lack of a better term, connected me to God and to the universe.
Yeah.
And I use the word God without any denomination attached to it. I felt a part of the universe, and in a way that I hadn't before. I felt a calling. I felt a reason to wake up in the morning and to work on my craft. And one thing that really changed my life as a recording artist was buying recording equipment. And part of me doesn't even really want to tell the truth about this, but the truth was I started to sell weed. Not for very long. I wasn't a good drug dealer because I smoked just as much as I sold, but I started to sell weed for a short period of time. And I took this money, and, my mom found the money and was like, where did you get this? Like, it turned in this whole thing. Like, I got basically caught by my mom right away. I basically pleaded the fifth.
Yeah.
She was like, ended up in denial, and we moved on. But I think that she knew what I was doing. And my dad said, you know what, if you can save up half the money, I'll put up the other half, and we'll find you a used digital 8-track. Now, at the time, Roland made this digital 8-track that was incredible for, $800 or whatever it was. Yeah. And I bought an MPC with the weed money that I was stacking up, and then I split this with my dad, and I was able to have my own studio in my bedroom.
Wow.
And being able to record myself, and every day that I worked on music, I would be like, I want to, and I had this external 2X CD burner, where at the end of what you would do, you would be able to burn the CD and go listen to it. And I was like, I want to be able to go into the car and listen to what I just recorded. And so I would work for 6, 7, 8, 12 hours as a 16, 17, 18-year-old.
Wow.
And developed a work ethic that I wouldn't have been able to exercise had I not had access to this equipment. And I think that looking back on it now and realizing that I definitely have ADD, and I'm sure I'd probably much worse then, there was something about being able to just focus in on one thing. That's just how my brain works. I can just, if we're talking about, bogey boys, and we're talking about fashion, I can spend days and days just focused on one thing. That's how I've always been. And with music, it was the same. And that's how that repetition, getting those 10,000 hours, putting in that time, making sure that you push through and keep going, and you burn the CD, and you go into the car and you listen to it, and then you do it again the next day. That is how I got better at being an artist.
And so you were in your bedroom, and you were like rapping into this mic, into this digital mixer. And what about beats? I mean, where were you? How were you creating the beats and the music?
Yeah, so I had a MPC 2000 XL. That was the beat machine, and I slowly graduated up to that. So I would make beats. I would sample old records, and that was how I was able to record. I would make the beat, I'd put it on loop, and I'd write the raps. And there was other producers that I worked with as well. But when I started to make beats, I became a one-stop shop. I didn't have to rely on anybody else. I didn't have to buy beats. I could do it all myself. And I think that was kind of the inception of this DIY mentality and practice that I still have today. Is like, if I can do it just as good as anyone else can. I just have to put in the time. And that was where it started.
I don't mean to put you on the spot, because I'm sure it's hard for you both to remember, and maybe you wouldn't want to remember. But I'm curious, what would like a rap lyric from Ben Haggerty have sounded like in the senior year of high school? What would you wrapped into that microphone?
Let me think. God, I don't know if I can remember. Let me see here. Man, I don't know. I remember the first rap I ever wrote. I remember at 15.
Yeah.
I could do the.
Yeah.
My first rap was like, my lyrics get you blown up like Air Max. Styles are free, but I put it down like a tax. Don't relax. When I'm in your presence, you're sure but unstated to lose calories like and then I think I said peasants or like peasants or I have no idea what any of that means.
That's pretty good.
And
15?
I didn't at the time.
But still, yeah.
I didn't at the time.
Yeah, I mean,
it makes no sense now. It made no sense then. But it was more like the exercise of just rhyming words and being like, oh man, I rhyme max and tax.
Yeah.
Like, yes, let's keep it going.
Yeah. And also just the rhyme and meter, like working out the rhythmic pacing of it.
Right.
Because I read that, because you were clearly, you were clearly focused enough to finish high school to go to college. You finished college.
Yeah.
I know you started a different college. You ended up at Evergreen State, but already in college, like you were really single-mindedly focused on this, on like making music. And first of all, I wonder when you got to college and you obviously you probably brought your gear with you and you were continuing to make music and incrementally get better. In your mind, I would imagine you're thinking, this is what I'm going to do. Was anyone around you, the people who loved you, family, did anybody ever say, Ben, look, you're just not, you're good, but you're not good. This is not going to be your career. It's a 1 in a million chance. Like my kids say, I want to be a professional basketball player, right? And I'm like,
right.
Or soccer player. I'm like, you're pretty good, but it's not going to happen.
Right.
Did anybody say that to you? I have to imagine people came up to you, right?
My pops, man. Pops used to say it to me all the time.
Because he loves you.
He loves me. And, it didn't happen until I was a bit later, like until I had graduated college.
Yeah.
And really like until I went to rehab at 25 or 6 or whatever it was. And, but I remember him saying those exact words, like, yo, this isn't going to happen. You've been doing this for a decade now and it hasn't happened. And I think you should still make music. I think that you should do what you love, but you need to get a real job. The old real job conversation. It definitely happened. And I understand it. I understand it from like a parent's perspective, particularly with a kid that has addiction issues.
Yeah.
And being like, yo, you need some structure. You need to go show up at 9 and you need to leave at 5 and get some structure in your life. Like that would benefit you. And I always told him that if I can just get sober, then I can do something with my music. Then my music will resonate with people.
It's interesting because you mentioned psychedelics earlier and psilocybin and there's obviously tons of clinical research and data now around the effects, the power, the beneficial power of certain psychedelics, and certainly helping people with trauma. But when you talk about addiction, you've talked about this, you've rapped about it, you've done a video with President Obama, which is amazing, a couple of years ago, on talking about addiction. How did you fall into? Because I think you were mainly addicted to alcohol and you were taking some pills, but I think alcohol mainly was your challenge. Am I right about that?
No, I was addicted to anything that made me feel different. Anything. So, that was weed. That was a pill. That was some lean. That was alcohol. It was anything that made me feel different. And that was from the very beginning. And it's interesting because I was just telling my daughter about this. And, some might question my parenting, talking to a 7-year-old about the first time that I drank alcohol. But
no,
I think that it's important.
Not at all.
I think it's important. My kids know that I'm sober. My 4-year-old, we pray, at night, and she's, we just kind of started, and she's been saying, I'm grateful that daddy's sober. That's who I am. And that's a part of my history. It's a part of my present. That's the disease of addiction will always be something that I have to actively fight against. And so I was telling my 7-year-old the story, and it was after school. I was 14 years old. My parents, were drinkers, still are drinkers. And there was a liquor cabinet type of thing above the fridge. And I went up there and I grabbed a half gallon of vodka, and I took 1 shot. And I liked the way that it felt. So I took 2 more. And then I took a couple more, and all of a sudden I had drinking 12 shots of vodka. I probably weighed 130 pounds in a very short time period, maybe 20 minutes. I was listening to Tupac. I had on my my undershirt on, around the house, and ended up hopping on the bus to go downtown. Went to McDonald's at Westlake in downtown Seattle. Had to try to throw up into the garbage can where you have to push the thing open like this. Threw up all over myself, went to the bathroom to clean up. The cops came in and I had to run from the cops, and through downtown Seattle with puke all over my shirt. And that was the very beginning of a painful next decade of trying to get sober. I believe that I had the allergy from the very beginning. And whether or not, I was predisposed, or whether it was from childhood trauma or anything, I don't know. But I knew from an early age that when I took a sip, I wouldn't stop. And that, or I would want more. And that has never gone away. It's a progressive disease. It's only gotten worse. So I was telling my daughter this story the other day, and because I want to be able to be honest about who I am, and also just to answer any questions.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's such a stigma and secrecy around the disease of addiction and around alcoholism. And I want to be able for her to ask me questions. I want to be able to talk about it. I don't want to hide from it.
Tell me about Macklemore, because I know that people started calling you that in high school already, Professor Macklemore.
Yeah.
Or Macklemore. Where did that name come from?
Macklemore. I was going to school in New York, and it was a summer program at Pratt.
It was like a summer program, right?
Yeah. It was at Pratt, and sorry, just 1 second. It was a summer program at Pratt, and I, was drinking a lot of alcohol. I was smoking a lot of weed, and, part of like what I would do, and take out the alcohol and the weed. It was a summer program at Pratt, and I would go out to thrift shops and I would get old plaid clothes. I would get polyester shirts, and I would dress up as this character that I created called Professor Macklemore. And eventually I dropped the professor, the rap career continued, and the Macklemore stayed. So that was the origin of where my name came from.
Despite your struggles with sobriety, you obviously had a drive.
Yeah.
You also had this drive. You had this thing inside of you that probably you didn't control, that controlled you, that was just driven. And I'm pretty sure that a turning point, a big turning point in your life happened in 2006, where you met 2 people who would transform your life. One became your wife, Trisha. The other one was Ryan Lewis, who would become your collaborator. And I believe you met Ryan through MySpace.
Yeah.
Right? I think, or maybe both of them. I did. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Ryan was through MySpace. and so was my wife. You know, my wife hit me up in the old inbox on MySpace. She had heard me on the radio, and on our local radio station in Seattle, KEXP.
You were played locally in Seattle.
Yeah, on KEXP, and she had heard me and hit up the old inbox, the original DM, which was on MySpace.
Yep.
And she offered to make me a sandwich. Little did she know the part of the song that she was listening to that, you know, made her hit me up was actually my friend rapping. So, you know, but it worked out, and the sandwich was amazing. And, you know, there's been a crazy the last 16 years since. But yeah, Ryan was the same. I heard a beat from Ryan on his artist page and immediately was like, whoa, you know, who is this kid? And I went over to his house.
Yeah.
He was still in high school at the time. And I believe, you know, I was in my
Seattle.
early 20s in Seattle. Yeah, he was living in his parents' house. I went down to the basement and was just immediately like, whoa, this kid is on one. He was so pumped. He was so caffeinated. And he had this like spirit about him, this very, you know, I take pictures and I do videos and I make beats and like, look at this piece of equipment and look at this. And he was just pumped. And I was like, this kid has got a work ethic and he's got a drive. And, you know, the beats weren't great yet, but he definitely showcased at that early age a commitment to whatever he was going to do, whether that was photography, videos, or production. He was going to give it his all, and I resonated with that.
He I guess you started to kind of collaborate informally. Like he started to take promotional photos of you. So initially he was a photographer, right? He wasn't producing music for you.
Yeah, he was. We did that one song over a beat that he had called "An American in Paris," and where I believe the sample was from. But yes, he was primarily a photographer, and he was one of the only people. I remember him putting together basically press kits. This was still in the era where you had like a digital press kit that you would send out.
Yeah.
An EPK, which I have no idea what that stands for, but electronic press kit, that's what it is.
Yep.
So we would send out press kits to get booked for festivals and shows. And he was kind of this like one-stop shop where he would take the pictures, he would edit the pictures and put together press kits for local rappers in the city. And I think that I was kind of the guinea pig of people to do that for him and build up his photography career, which of course was cut short later on in life by our music career, but that was the beginnings.
So you meet Ryan in 2006, and you are also finishing a degree, and you also are working on music and really self-releasing music, right? Like,
right.
How are you funding your music at that time? Like, how are you financing pressing CDs or were you not doing that at all?
Yeah, I was. I put out a CD, an album called The Language of My World in 2005, which is also, I believe, the year that I kind of pseudo-graduated from college. And that CD, that album, I would sell direct to fans. You know, if I had a show, I sold it online, I believe.
Right.
And, you know, there wasn't a lot of overhead to my life. Rent was much cheaper back then, and I was able to book a handful of shows where I would get paid, you know, anywhere from like $150 to like, you know, maybe $300. That was kind of my going rate at that point for a show. And then if you can sell, you know, a couple $100 worth of CDs at the show, throw in a t-shirt or two here or there, and you start pressing up your own, your own merch, that's enough money to live off of, at least for a period of time. I moved back to Seattle from Olympia, and I was recording people as well. So I had, you know, the shows that I was doing, the merch that I was selling, and then I was also recording other rappers in the studio. And that was kind of like my side hustle on top of, any sort of show income that was happening.
I mean, you must have been such a fish out of water in so many ways at Evergreen, because that's sort of like, again, an epicenter of grunge and indie, and Riot Girl comes out of there, Bikini Kill, that whole scene. And here you are, this rapper at Evergreen State College. Did you feel like a fish out of water?
Evergreen is an interesting place. Like, you give yourself your own grade. Like, it's so diverse in terms of what people are doing there. It was a really cool experience for me because, for one, I found a hip hop community in Olympia.
Right.
And which I think is always the foundation of any successful career, comes from community, of building with others, of getting better with other people.
Yeah.
That is the core of, I think, really where music comes from. Like, we don't create in a vacuum. And with the advancement of technology and how easy it is to send files back and forth and not be in the same room with people and all of that, like, we're losing something. And there's a magic that happens when you find your people. And whether that's like freestyling with your friends, whether that's in the same space writing songs, whether that's just going out to lunch or whatever, like, that to me is what, where I thrive, is being around others and those types of conversations. So that was happening in Olympia. If I wouldn't have found my people, then yes, I would have felt like a fish out of water.
Yeah.
But because there was this very small, close-knit hip-hop community, like there is in so many other little offshoots of major metropolitan cities, I was able to feel a part of.
Yeah.
And that's, I think, what we want as human beings, is just to feel a part of.
I'm curious, as your collaboration with Ryan deepened over the years. I mean, 2006 you meet, and it would be 5 years, roughly 5 years from that point, you would record the album, or start recording the album that would become The Heist, which of course propelled the both of you to superstardom. But in that period before that, help me understand how you guys would collaborate. What would you do? Would you meet on a regular basis? Would you come to him with lyrics? Would he come to you with beats? How did you work practically together?
Well, we were in his parents' basement. That was where we made our first EP, called the Versus EP. And I would,
you recorded it on his equipment in the basement.
Yeah, I believe so. Or maybe it wasn't because this was after I got out of rehab. And this is when when I really focused. This was the pivotal point of you know what, if I'm going to, this was like, okay, now I have the ingredients to stay clean. Now I know, I've been introduced to a recovery community. Now I'm going to put everything into my recovery and recording music. And I'm going to try to combine those. And if this doesn't work, then I'll throw in the towel. But let me just try one more time. And I would go to Ryan's parents' basement. That's where I first wrote Other Side, and which was a massive record for me, not in terms of money or anything like that, but just in terms of building a fan base. Other Side was a huge record.
Yeah, and that sampled the song Other Side by the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Yeah, exactly. So we did a whole EP kind of sampling rock music or indie rock music. And Ryan and I would record. I would go over there. I mean, I remember writing Other Side, and it was just, he looped up the bass line from Other Side by the Red Hot Chili Peppers. And that song wrote itself in probably 20 minutes. A lot of times I like to write where it's just really the most basic piece of music, whether that's piano chords, whether that's, a drum loop with the bass line or just the bass line by itself. Like, I like it really stripped down where I can hear the isolation, where I can hear myself think. I'm not competing with a fully fleshed out beat. It's just me and an instrument, and I'm trying to channel that place within myself to become, present, which is where I think that the best music is made, where I'm not having any outside intrusive thoughts. I'm just there in pure silence with me and whatever I'm writing to.
Where do your ideas come from? How do you find them?
You know, it's
Like, let's take,
interesting. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, please.
Well, I think that, you know, it's slowed down over time because there's, you know, life gets busy, right? Like,
Yeah.
I have 3 kids and, and, you know, a golf clothing company and, you know, so many different facets of business that have now, you know, taken over my life. And I think that when I was, you know, in my early 20s or my teenage years, I was constantly, the only thing I had to think about was hip hop. Like, that was it. There was nothing else.
Yeah.
There was no Rolodex of ideas that, you know, or Rolodex of things I had to do. There was no calendars, no schedule. It was like, I go to school, I come home, like, that was it. I think as you get older, like, you know, that calendar fills up.
Yeah.
But I was constantly thinking of ideas. And I mean, even with Thrift Shop, the first time that I had thought of the concept about writing a song about thrift shopping was 2008, and I didn't record that song until 3 years later. I was just writing down, you know, 4 bars here, 6 bars here, but I knew I had the concept. And I've always been someone that has been driven by concepts. What is the concept of this song?
Yeah.
What is the concept of this song? And Thrift Shop was one of those that slowly wrote itself, where you had other side where it was like, I became a conduit to the cosmos. Thrift Shop was like, I'm going to just chip away. I'm just going to chip away at this concept. And eventually it turned into what we now know as Thrift Shop. But that took years of writing that record.
I'm interested in this idea of concept. Obviously, other sides related to your struggles with substance abuse. Thrift Shop is it's a fun and whimsical song, and then there's a song off Heist, which of course everyone knows, Can't Hold Us. A song that you hear in a gym or in a spin class. It's like it is a song that people. It's like Lose Yourself. It's like one of those songs that people get inspired by, and I'm not sure how you feel about that, but when you wrote that song, was the concept, I mean, do you also, not just that song, but other songs, in your mind, do you have the concept of trying to inspire people, or is that present in your thinking?
I try not to go there. I think that...
Why?
To answer your question from before and tie it to this, I think that the music pulls it out of the writer, right? Ryan had played me that beat that was Can't Hold Us. He played that for me years before I wrote to it. He had that back in his parents' basement before we had a studio together. He played that for me, and I was like, whoa, this sounds like a stadium anthem. This sounds like this should be at soccer games. Like, I have no idea what to do with this record. I have no clue. This isn't a genre that I'm really familiar with. This isn't a BPM that I'm familiar with. Like, this is different. But I also knew that it was big, and every like couple months Ryan would hit me up and be like, yo man, you got to write to that beat. You got to write to that beat. And finally, just almost to appease him, I was like, okay, fine, I'll try. And that's how Can't Hold Us was made. And I don't know at the time if there was even spin classes. There definitely wasn't Peloton. Actually, it wasn't around yet. But, you know, there was definitely, there's no way to hear that beat and to not like, you know, it sounded like exactly what it is. It's turned into a stadium anthem. You can play that. It's played every single day around the world in stadiums with people competing on a professional sports level. Like, still, that song streams crazy. It's probably in, 25% of spin classes on a daily basis. Like, it's just one of those records. And that's what it turned into. At the time, no, I had no idea that it would inspire people. I knew musically that it was a piece of music production that that sounded like it should be played in front of 75,000 people.
Yeah. Does that, I don't know, maybe I'm interpolating, but does it bother you that it's in spin classes and it's a stadium anthem? I mean, it's an amazing song, but I wonder if that part of it.
No,
okay.
It doesn't bother me at all. No, absolutely not. I mean, I part of me wants to like answer that like, no, it's paid for my house. But like the other part of me is like, that's more important is that, that's probably my favorite song to perform still to this day. Like to be in front of, 10, 20, 30, 50,000 people and play that record around the world and to get that reaction right when those drums come in. I mean, I think that's, I don't know if it's every artist's dream, but that's always been mine. That's always been the vision is I want to be in front of as many people as possible playing my music. And that record definitely was a massive contributor to that.
You were very well known in Seattle by the time you were getting ready to release Heist. You were playing at the baseball stadium and you were performing in front of thousands of people. You were known locally, and there was a lot of major label interest in signing you and Ryan, but you famously resisted, and released that album independently. I mean, it's kind of a crazy decision, right? Because here you were, you didn't have a whole lot of money at that point.
Right.
You were going to be responsible for distributing this record and selling it. I know you had sort of this. You hired Warner Brothers to kind of promote it a little bit, but it was not. It was an independent decision label. From a business standpoint, it's just the craziest, riskiest, potentially stupidest thing you could have done. Of course, it didn't turn out that way, but it was kind of nuts to make that decision. Why did you decide to do that?
Well, most of what you said is true. The part that's not true is that there wasn't major label interest. There wasn't. We walked in to Mike Caron's office at Atlantic Records and played him Thrift Shop and Can't Hold Us.
Wow.
And he sat there eating a salad with his feet up on his desk and said, I think these are great guys, but I don't see there's commercial viability here. I don't see these getting played on the radio. And we walked out of there. I think we maybe took one other meeting, but that one will always stick with me. And so that was one of those moments where I was like, okay, well, I guess we have to do this by ourselves. And we had made enough money independently off of touring at that point. We were doing like, I don't know, 200 to 500 cap rooms around the US and around Europe. We had probably saved up, I don't know, a couple $100,000, enough to put it right back into the music, because on a traditional major label, they're basically your bank, right? You have to pay them back with really shitty interest interest rates. And we didn't have that.
But they give you a big advance.
But they give you an advance. Yes. You're spending their money. You're playing with house money. And yet you get taxed in the end. For us, we had to put it up ourselves. And you are also correct that we had a distribution company, ADA. And ADA was a subsidiary of Warner. And ADA got our records into stores and, Targets and, Best Buys and all of that, along with getting it up on iTunes. But the album and everything that I've ever done has been completely 100% independent. It's just it's distributed by ADA. But there was no choice. It wasn't like there was a bidding war. Before we put it out, there was no bidding war. We were completely under the radar and no one knew what we were about to do. including ourselves.
It's totally crazy because Thrift Shop hit number one and then Can't Hold Us in Same Love. And you guys were the first artists since 1994 to have a number one hit from an independent label. And as you mentioned before the interview started, the one in 94 was Lisa Loeb, which I didn't know. There's a reason why that doesn't happen often, because it not because independent music isn't good, but because the big labels control what the radio stations play, and they control what gets put out there and what people are exposed to. How did you get your music exposed to people? What was it? The internet? What enabled that?
YouTube. It was YouTube. Thrift Shop went viral. Thrift Shop, it started out, I don't know, we got 100,000 plays the first day or something like that, or 50,000, but it didn't stop. And every day it'd be like, yo, do you know that Thrift Shop, like, we went up by 1 million today.
Wow.
Like 1 million more people saw the video today. And then it was like 2 million people watched the video today. And it kept growing. And independently, alternative radio started to play Thrift Shop. I don't know where it started.
Yeah.
Radio is a very interesting game, and it is a game. Independently, alternative radio picked it up, and it was doing well. They have all this data. This data comes back, like, how long people listen for until they turn the station, or do they make it through the whole song? And they have these analytics and ways to track it. Nowadays, it's a lot quicker. It's like, how many streams does it have on Spotify this week? If not, we kick it out of the algorithm and we move on.
Yeah.
Back then, it came in slower. So this is a slow burn. And radio is still a slow burn in a lot of ways. But alternative radio picked it up, and it was doing well at alternative radio. And ADA was like, well, we got to work this. We got to work this thing. Like, this is catching on. Do you want to put up some money and have us go do our circuit and get this thing played? And we're like, sure. So I think our first spend was like 50 grand.
Yeah.
And the data came back, and it was like, yeah, people are listening. Sorry, I think there's someone in the hallway.
Hallway?
Yeah.
That's fine.
It started to pick up, and then Warner came in, like the big brother to ADA, and they were like, look, it's doing really well. And I remember, and we want to work it. We want to work it to radio. And again, we're not signed to Warner, never signed. This was okay, we will hire you guys to work this to radio.
Wow.
Now, this is after we have, we've come out of the gates. We sold 70, I believe, 8,000 or 9,000 our first week. All of a sudden people are paying attention. Like, L.A. Reid is flying to our show in Montana with his whole crew. Like, yo, let me sign you guys. And
wow,
where have you come from? Who are you? Like, what's going on? And at that point, we had the leverage. So we had the leverage with Warner at the time too. So we got kind of a once in a lifetime deal with Warner that no one had ever done before, where we're like, yo, we'll hire just your radio department. We're not going to sign a deal. We're not under any contracts, like in terms of albums or nothing. We are literally just going to hire what you guys do best, which is radio.
Wow.
And that's what major labels do best.
Yeah.
And we don't need any resources. That's all we need. And Warner came in and killed it. And we killed it. And the song killed it. And it was completely unorthodox in a way that I don't know if it could work like that anymore. I don't know that radio does work like that, but we just were at the right place at the right time with the right people.
Ben, how did you have the wisdom and the business acumen and instincts to make that decision? Or maybe it was Ryan or both of you. How did you guys know to do that? Because they were probably coming to you. You got a lot of attention for Thrift Shop, but they're probably coming dangling big dollars. L.A. Reid, I mean, people are probably coming to you dangling big dollars. 90% of people in your position would have said, all right, I'll take the money, because who knows, maybe we won't have another hit. How did you have the what would be the insight not to do that?
I've always wanted to own my music. I don't want to give it away. I don't want to be a puppet. No dollar amount to me is worth that. Now, of course, that is easier said after the fact. But I think that we had the leverage. And when you have the leverage and you're making money, like for us to sell 79,000 copies in the first week, and then all of a sudden the show offers come in and you're like, oh my God, I'm gonna touch 7 figures this year. We didn't even have to have the L.A. Reid conversation. Kind of stopped there. It was awesome to get to meet him. It was great to get to meet his team. We didn't even get to the point of like them dangling the dollars in front of our face, because we knew that we wanted to continue to do it by ourselves. That's what got us there in the first place. And I'll never forget, my manager called me. We were in Wisconsin touring, and he called me and he said, you know what? Thrift Shop is taking off. Warner wants to come in and work this thing. Now, it's going to cost about $250,000 to work this to radio. Now, again, usually if you're signed to a label, that's just an internal spend that you don't really have to sign off on. They own your music, and they're going to, add up the dollars. For us, we're having to pay for that. Now, that's $250,000 to work a song to radio, which is about what a full campaign costs.
Yeah.
And he said, for one, it's a lot of money. We don't know that it will work. But more importantly, 2, if this does work, this will change your life forever. You will not be an underground rapper anymore. Do you want that?
Yeah.
Is this what you want? Now, I believe we were on a tour doing around 1,000 capacity rooms, and he was like, I am completely on board. If you don't want to take it here, you can do 1,000 cap rooms for the rest of your life. Or maybe it was 500. You can do 500 cap rooms for the rest of your life. I am completely on board with that. But if we do this could change your entire life forever. And I said, let's do it. And sure enough, it worked.
That record, of course, became a massive success, with Same Love, with Can't Hold Us, Thrift Shop, and other songs on it. One of the things that you have been talking about a long time in your career, I think going back to 2005, you'd written a song talking about the concept of appropriation. And as this record became more and more popular and huge, enormous, the biggest record in the world, you became more, you were more prominent, you were famous.
Right.
And you became more and more vocal about the concept of musical appropriation. Obviously, hip-hop is a black art form created in the Bronx by black artists. But I wonder why, and I want to kind of dive into this for a little bit, because it's been a big theme in your career, which is to talk a lot about your privilege and appropriation, and I'm not sure if it's a mixture of guilt or what, but I wonder why it is so present in your work. I mean, there are plenty of rappers, white rappers, Beastie Boys, Eminem, LP, who they don't necessarily do it. I just saw the Elvis movie, and of course he was massively influenced by black music, by country music, the Rolling Stones, Led Zeppelin, right? I mean, so much popular culture is rooted in black art forms.
Right.
But I wonder why, for you, it has been something that you talk about a lot, and that you've written music about, and that I don't know it. Yeah, tell me about your thinking along those lines, and why you don't feel you can just make music and not talk about that.
It's the truth, plain and simple. Again, music is my means of finding my truth, or my truth in, society, or on a cultural topic, or whatever it might be. If I was to skim over systemic oppression, if I was to skim over cultural appropriation, if I was to just, let's just not mention that part of it, I think that that it's disingenuous. I think that it does a disservice to my quest in finding out who I am and my purpose and my reason for being here through trying to find and communicate through the medium of music. And I think that it would just have been fake. Now, it's interesting to me because you're obviously a very smart dude. And even you kind of asking this question, phrasing it in the I don't know if it's white guilt or whatever. I think that that's where a lot of my scrutiny and criticism has come from. Oh God, he feels so guilty. He feels just stop talking about it. Just rap. Don't talk about, your white tears and, your white guilt. It's okay, well, if we really, for one, I've been talking about it since 2005. Off of the language in my world.
Yeah.
And look at all of the history that you just talked about. White people have a history of doing this to black art forms, right? Rock and roll was completely co-opted by white people.
Correct.
And
yes.
And now, and then that happened with hip hop. History is repeating itself. And I also benefit on both sides of the coin, right? I benefit because in society, the color of my skin, from systemic oppression, we have been taught that white is, has power, that there is a long lineage of, from the last 500 to, way before that, this long lineage of whiteness at the top and everything else beneath it. And it is completely false. It is completely fabricated. It is insidious, systemically put in place to oppress people of color. And if I'm just okay, let's just not talk about it and keep making money off black music, it would be fake. I am a guest in the house of hip hop, and Eminem has talked about it. I believe that he said something similar. And that's just the truth. So would things have panned out differently for me had I never brought it up? Sure. Absolutely. Was writing White Privilege 2 in the way that I approached that record controversial? Did it polarize people? Was it, coming off of massive success of commercial, records like Can't Hold Us and Thrift Shop and Same Love and these records, and pivoting and making a song called White Privilege 2 in many ways detrimental to the momentum that I had built? Absolutely. And I think that was a choice that I had to make at the time. And I didn't want to glaze over it. I didn't want to, just kind of work my way around it. If I was going to go there, it was the powers that be, right? Because there's a reason why Beastie Boys work. There's a reason why Eminem has had his tenured run. There's a reason why Middle America falls in love with Eminem, and he's put on this pedestal as the greatest rapper of all time, and no one knows who Royce da 5'9" is. We fall in love with people who look like us. And America has the resources to propel who they want to propel up, and kind of, shit on other people. And I think that I got propelled up in a certain moment. So if you have the analysis, if you have any sort of, pulse on how these things work, and you don't speak on it, then what's going to change?
Yeah.
Because And that was important to me. I wanted to be able to call it what it was and to see the injustice for what it was. And did I do it perfectly? No, absolutely not. I think that that's one of those things that like, what we kept coming back to this question of like, what are you willing to sacrifice? What are you willing to sacrifice to contribute to being anti-racist, to contribute against dismantling the system of white supremacy? What are you willing to sacrifice? And, you know, that was just one of those moments where I felt like if I don't say something, I'm being disingenuous to who I am and where I've come from.
You know, I think most humans are naturally inclined to look for solutions. It's like, I think it's in our DNA, like it's a survival mechanism. Like, okay, that saber-toothed tiger didn't kill me. Now I got to figure out how to kill it, or I got to figure out how to get away from it, right? And so I wonder, and I don't expect you to have the answer, but if ultimately the goal, right, is, let's say we all agree that the goal is justice. Mm-hmm. And I think it's sort of a pie in the sky notion, but I think ultimately all of us want harmony, right? But of course, the steps to get there are steep. In your view, by talking about the music you make and others make as appropriative, which you can, or let's say, you know, how does it and appropriative isn't quite the right word, because I think you could also say that some music honors, right, Black culture. But I wonder how do you, if you could begin to think about how your voice could contribute to, I don't know, moving the needle forward just a little bit, making it just a little bit better. What do you think that better looks like? Like, once everyone acknowledges this reality, then what would the next step be?
Well, I think the first step as a white person in America is to have the analysis of how race works in our country, the history of it, and systemic oppression, and what white supremacy is. I think that once you have that as the foundation, your lens shifts. You look at the world differently. You look at your own privilege differently. We are not all created equal. We did not all start at the same marker in terms of this race that we, you know, this life's race that we're all running around the track. There's a massive advantage and a head start if you have white skin in America, even in poverty. And that has been by design. That has been by a system of laws that protect white people. That has been by, a lineage of passing down resources. That is by how the police treat you if you have white skin versus if you have black skin or brown skin in America. Until we actually come face to face with the powers that be and what has made our country what it is, then we're going to continue to act out of, complicity to contribute to racism or anything in between. So that was the intention of like, I want to talk about this in my records, because if we are actually going to have a conversation, if we are going to evolve, we have to have a conversation around race and around privilege. That was the goal. Can we have a conversation? Is this going to create and facilitate a conversation amongst Americans? And I think that, it's like white privilege too is like a 9-minute song or something.
Yeah.
No one has the attention span now to like listen to a 15-second snippet of a record. But I do think that it helped contribute to the conversation, and by whoever it was meant for. And I don't control, what gets played on the radio. I don't control what goes viral or what TikTok sound is going to be the trend of the week. But I do, at the very least, for whoever listens or is willing to listen or who it's supposed to hit, I do believe that art does change people's lives. I do believe that music with meaning does have sustaining power, even if it's on a much lesser scale than what it was intended for.
I wonder, though, Ben, I mean, do you feel like, I mean, talking about your childhood, right, all the way from age 7 when you first heard NWA to the music that spoke to you, even though it wasn't your culture, it wasn't where you came from, but it spoke to you nonetheless, and it inspired you, right? Black art is what inspired you to create art. So do you think that do you think your music is appropriative, or do you think it's done in honor of what came before it?
I think that it can be both. I think art is a weapon of resistance, and that if I'm just using hip hop as like a stepping stone, or just for personal gain, or I'm just hoarding the money that I make of hip hop and not putting it back into community. I personally, just where that sits with me spiritually, that feels like I'm using hip hop, not for the greater good. I'm using it for Ben Haggerty. I'm using it for Macklemore. I'm using it just to build my brand and, the place of oppression that birthed hip hop doesn't reap any benefit of that. It continues, people are still broke. The system is still fucked up, and the cycle continues. If I use my voice and my platform, and not all the time necessarily, like no one's trying to hear that, but like in select moments and where I put my resources, where I put my time, where I put my energy, if I'm conscious about where my income is coming from, where the type of records that I'm writing, who I'm sharing my platform with, who I'm bringing on tour, how I'm spreading my resources amongst the people that I feel like, it can make a big difference in their lives, then I'm a participant in an authentic way.
Yeah.
Then I'm changing things for the good. If it's just about me, myself, and I, that is when I miss the bigger picture. And I think that it's easy when the fame comes in and, the labels get involved and everyone's trying to squeeze as much as they possibly can out of you. It's easy to miss the bigger picture of like, no one needs this much money. We're here for a very finite amount of time.
Yeah.
What did you do with your platform when you had it? And did you coast? Did you just get comfortable and put your feet up? Or did you continue to challenge yourself, the system, your own creativity, your own inner demons and battles, and push through and make art that actually means something?
Yeah.
And again, I'm not saying that every record has to have some like deep social commentary at all. But now more than ever, I feel like behind the scenes, what I do matters, where I'm actually. And so that to me answers your question about whether it's appropriation or whether it's, participation. It is participation if I'm still remembering the originators, where it came from, and what we're actually fighting against, because it is a form of resistance.
Yeah. Ben, you've had a string of hits since Heist, Downtown, and Good Old Days, and Glorious. And I wonder how, now it's different. We're in a different environment. There are 100,000 songs released on Spotify every day. Even artists like Lizzo often have a hard time, getting a hit. It's very, very hard. And oftentimes it's TikTok that determines what young people listen to. You've got a relatively new track out that you did with Tones and I, who sang Dance Monkey, which is an amazing track. What do you when you write a song now, is it important to you in any way that it becomes a hit, only to the extent that lots of people listen to it, or do you not really care about that anymore?
No, I care. I'd be lying if I was like, I don't care at all. I definitely care. And I think the reason why I care is because I want to be able to tour and play new music that I believe in. And I think that you saying, however many songs come out a day on Spotify, it's a ridiculous. Is that really true? 100,000, or is it 100,000 a week?
Yes.
100,000 a day?
I think it's a day.
Whatever it is.
Yeah, 50 to 100 a day, yeah.
Yeah, that's insane. It is harder than ever to get a hit record. And there's no secret formula. The rules have completely changed. And yes, you are right. TikTok is running the game. And who makes it on TikTok and who actually really pops off from TikTok, it's just no one knows. It's like,
yeah,
it's this no man's land of music. So I think there was part of, when working on this album that I'm releasing in the next handful of months, and Chant with Tones and I is off that album. In releasing music now, in the recording process, I was recording on Orcas Island where I have a spot, and I was up there and I was writing a record, and I had this moment of like, you know what? None of these songs might work. Like, all of these could be for nothing. And I quickly checked myself and was like, that's not true. It's not for nothing. Like, the creative process is really the joy of the whole thing. But in terms of what it actually does after it's finished, these might not work at all. And it was the first time that I really faced that, where I realized how powerless I am as an artist with a platform and X amount of millions of people that follow me on Instagram and, YouTube channel and all that. Like, that is almost obsolete at this point.
Yeah.
And getting in front of people and getting their attention is harder than ever. And if you don't have one of those TikTok moments, or if you're not a brand new artist that everyone's like, oh my God, you got to hear this. This is something brand new. Like having our moment that we had in 2012 when you're brand new to the world and everyone wants to talk about it. It's extremely difficult. Or if you're, unless you're like Beyonce, like there's a handful of A-list artists that can do it. But it's really challenging.
I mean, I wonder when you sit down to write something, like the song Next Year, right?
Right.
To me, that song did not chart.
No.
But I don't understand why, because it's a great song, and it came out right before New Year's Eve. And I remember seeing that live performance that you did of it in Pioneer Square, and it's so good. So there's an optimism, a wonderful optimism in that song. And I wonder when you sit down to write something now, of course you want lots of people to hear it, right? You want it to resonate. How do you, knowing what you know and knowing what you know worked in the past, how do you think about what you write now? Do you look to the past and say, well, Thrift Shop worked, or Can't Hold Us worked because it did this, or Downtown worked because it did this, or Glorious, or is it just impossible to know?
I think it's impossible to know, but I also think that I have probably more of an insight than most people. But I also agree with you. Like, I think that was part of my revelation when I was writing on Orcas, is I'm like, I have arguably more songs on this next body of work that could be filed into like, this could be a hit category than ever before. And if I had to put money on them, none of them will be. Not because of how they sound, not because of lack of a chorus or production or raps or any of that. It's just you're rolling the dice and hoping to land in this like sliver of an algorithm, and that this one person catches onto it, and then someone else does, and then this wildfire starts to organically happen through like this algorithm that no one can figure out. And that's the only way that it works, because that's what Spotify and that's what Apple are paying attention to. That's just where we're at. I do think that, I just got off tour with Imagine Dragons, and these are guys that, are selling out stadiums. They're massive group. And looking at, and Dan is an incredible songwriter. Like, he writes stadium anthems. And I'm looking at, and we talk about the formula, right? Like, what's the formula? For one, there is no formula anymore. And thank God. I think that formulas are made to be broken. I think that they lock artists and pin them in a corner. And that's one thing that I'm proud of that we've done in terms of the hits that we've had, is there's never been this formulaic, like, oh, well, that works, so now I need to write another song about vintage thrift shopping or whatever. Like, there's no sound that's been emulated. It's like, I'm going to do me. I'm going to make the music that I make, but I'm not going to follow some pattern. And, but I'm watching Dan and I'm watching the people and I'm looking at the songs, and this is primarily Imagine Dragons fans, right? Like, we're in front of, 35,000 people in Las Vegas. Like, I mean, maybe I brought out, I don't know, 5,000 people, maybe 10,000 people at tops, but like, primarily it's still their audience. And I'm watching what records they know and which records they don't know. And it was surprising to me. It was like this case study in human, in what humans resonate with. And Thrift Shop would come on, and the what would start, and no one would sing.
Wow.
And I was like, this is the first time in my career, and this is not like, in the middle of the tour, I went to Europe and did a show in Munich, and I had 50,000 people saying the what. It's not like people have forgot it, that, it's been a decade now. It's not that. It's, for whatever reason, this like missed this population of an audience, or they didn't feel comfortable, or it wasn't a full arena singing it, so people didn't sing it. And, people on my team have been like, bro, there was more people than you thought were saying it. You just couldn't hear it from your vantage point. But either way, it felt different to me than it ever has.
Yeah.
But songs like Glorious, songs like Can't Hold Us, even songs like Good Old Days, I think that human beings, for my music, really resonate when it's it makes people feel good. And that is like a through line.
Interesting. That's really interesting.
Yeah, that is a through line. People want to feel good.
Yes.
When they get in the car, what do they want to put on? And yes, there's music for different moods, and like, I play this when I'm depressed, or I play this when it's raining and I'm driving in the car, or whatever. But for the most part, popular culture wants to feel good.
Yeah.
We want to escape. Music is the perfect avenue for us to escape, to lift our spirits, to feel good. That's why Good Old Days feels good. That's why Glorious feels good. That's why Can't Hold Us feels good. And unless music is doing that, I think that for me, it will be difficult for a record to catch on the same way that it has in the past.
So will that, because I don't think that's a cynical way at all to think about your work. I mean, if you were to sit down and say, I'm going to write something that does make people feel good, like, okay, there might be some snooty indie critic who will turn their nose at it and say, oh, here's Macklemore writing some, rubbish. But that doesn't matter, right? If audiences connect with it, that's okay, right? That could be a way to write a song.
Yes, that is 100% okay. And I think that, like, there's like, there's the people that are like, oh God, everyone likes it, I hate it. Like, I want to be the person that doesn't like this, or that doesn't, that hears Can't Hold Us and is like, oh God, Macklemore, like, oh, I could never, this is the worst. It's like, those critics, I stopped paying attention to them a really long time ago. I could care less. I want people to whatever emotion is intended for the record, whether that's to think and examine, whether that's to dance or turn up, whether that's to celebrate life, whatever emotion was intended, and that's how it's received, or however it's received. As long as it's being received, that's the goal, is a connection. And that's the greatest gift as an artist, is when people are connecting with it. And I think, to get back to your question around, like, do I still want to hit? I don't love the word hit, but like absolutely, because I want people to hear what I've worked really hard on, right? Like that's what I want. I just want people to hear it. And I was performing in Seattle the other day at a private event, and there was 1,500 people, ages probably 25 to 45, if I'm guessing. And this is a Seattle crowd. And I played Maniac. And I taught them how to do the clap before the show. Which is
I think it's your latest.
It's my latest single, yeah. It's another one of those records that you hear it and you're like, yeah, this could be like, a diamond record, or no one could hear it because it didn't get in the algorithm. And I'm playing this song and I'm looking at the audience who, again, my target, if you were to be like, who's a Macklemore fan, like 25 to 40 years old or whatever, like this is them right here, 1,500 of them. From Seattle, all that. No one looked like they had ever heard the record. And it wasn't that they didn't naturally gravitate towards it in a live setting. I could just tell that at least, 90% of these people had never heard it, because we have to compete now with so many other songs, with so many forms of media, with dwindling attention spans that are literally shuffling and scrolling through life. And it's really hard to get people to know something's out. Yeah. And I was talking to Ryan actually on the other day on the 10th anniversary of the heist. And we were on the phone and I was explaining this and he was like, yeah, I mean, I'm not looking, and this is my job, but I'm not actively like listening to new music or trying to find something that I love. Yeah. That's brand new. I'm going back to the stuff that I know, that's familiar. And so it's all of these different things that are equating to this moment in music history where it is, in a way, a wide open market for anyone to have a hit, and also harder than it ever has been for anyone that has had a hit in the past to get another one.
Before I let you go, Ben, I'm curious, when you were a kid, and a little bit of a screw up, would you have said to yourself, I'm creative? Would you have thought of yourself as a creative person?
Yeah, absolutely.
You would have. Okay.
And a massive reason why I would have called myself creative is because my mom called me creative.
Right.
She instilled that in me. It was from age of 7, drawing pictures. She was someone that was like, oh my God, Ben, like, look at what you did. You're so creative. Like everyone, look at what my son has done. And she was one of those type of moms that gave me a false sense of confidence. Also probably in a beautiful way. And I believed it. And I believed it enough that I was a teenager making trash, rap songs, thinking they were great, because I didn't have an instant feedback loop of the internet to go upload them and get shit on in the comments. Yeah. So like that was if I would have came up in this era where everyone is a critic and everyone has a voice, and there's so many people in the comments and on TikTok, and there's so much negativity out there. Everyone wants to be, a pitchfork writer behind, the keyboard. I don't know if I would have had a thick enough skin to get past all that criticism. And being that it was like the late 90s and there wasn't that instant critic to tear you down, I believed that I was still dope, and I kept going. Yep. And so my mom calling me creative at an early age was such a massive just boost to my overall perception of who I was as a person, as an artist. And I believe that shit.
And allowed you to actually be really bad at the beginning in order to eventually get good.
Right. Which is so important. And I watch my kids, and they'll look at a picture and try to draw it, and they'll stop halfway and they'll crumple up the paper and throw it and be like, oh my God, this is so bad. And I'll uncrumple the paper and look at it. And, the beauty is in the imperfection. the beauty is that it
Yeah.
doesn't look exactly like Elsa from Frozen. It looks like a weird, janky version of Elsa with so much character and personality. Like, it's so much cooler than what I could do, because I could draw something more similar to what it looks like. You know, it's like what Picasso said, like, you know, paint like a child or draw like a child. Like, I started to draw with my left hand, like retraining your brain to realize that, like, those moments that are, you know, that art that is so left field, that is so off from the status quo or the norm, that's where the magic really lies. And can you get back to that childlike place where all the expectations of what something should be or how it should perform or should stream, can you let those go and just make art for the sake of making art? And that's where I feel like I got to, in terms of the acceptance around this album. It's like, you know what? Let's have fun. Let's make music because we love to make music. Let's make great music because we're great at it. And the rest, whether we fall into the algorithm or not,
Yeah.
that's all you can do as an artist. At the core, at the very, very core, we are storytellers. Who hears my story is not up to me at this point.
Amen to that. Ben, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, Guy, thank you. It's been great.
That was my conversation with Ben Haggerty, better known as Macklemore. We'll link to some of his greatest videos, including Thrift Shop, at our website, thegreatcreators.com/Macklemore. We publish show notes for all of our episodes at thegreatcreators.com. For more episodes like this on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button below this video. And if you want to get notified when we post a new video, click the bell button as well. I'm Guy Raz. You've been watching and listening to The Great Creators. Thank you so much, and we'll see you here next time.